Would encourage everybody to go to the meetup site and join in on the discussions. We'll be looking for more sponsors. We'll be looking for more speakers and for more topics. So if there's any individual you want to see and maybe have us bring in, or if there are any topics you would like to see covered with the group, be sure to let us know. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors, the Iron Yard, for providing the space, Tech Systems in the back for bringing all the food. So, wave for Tech Systems if you want to introduce yourselves and talk with them afterwards. We've got sponsorships with Wiley Books, Rocks Books, Pluralsight, and JetBrains. So we'll be handing out some raffle tickets for some of those items a little later. We really appreciate you coming. So with that, hand it over to Mark.
Cool. I'll hand it.
You're good.
I'll take it back from Holly.
Just knock on the one with her.
This is Holly. She's our campus representative. What's your official title?
Student relations.
Student relationships with here at the Iron Yard.
Yes. So if anyone has any questions or you guys want to know more information, we have kids classes coming up January 23rd. Those are free for ages 8 to 12 and then 13 to 17. It'll be 5 weeks, so those start soon. And we have our next cohort, which will be another .NET cohort, Ruby on Rails, and front end. That all starts on March 13th as well. So like I said, you know where to find me. I greet you at the door. Say anybody you can.
Thank you, Holly. Pretty much, she's all the non-technical stuff with the Iron Yard, and I'm all the technical .NET stuff. So, any questions? Go for that about that. Go to her. If you're curious about the course, come to me. So, my name is Mark Dewey. As Holly and John said, I'm the .NET instructor here at the Iron Yard. I'm going through my first cohort right now. We're on week 9 out of 14-ish. It's going very well so far. I graduated with a CS degree in 2011. I've been working in the industry since 2007-ish. I've worked in the government space, I've worked in the commercial space, I've worked with startups, I've worked with big companies, I've always worked in .NET. .NET is my favorite language to work in. I've also done Python sites, Go sites, Code Fusion sites, for all you people out there. And I've done Node sites as well. But I always come back to .NET for its robust, its powerful, preaching to the choir. So that's a little bit about me. So here's the Wi-Fi password, and the information is not already on it. If you want to follow along and actually code along with me, all the course material and references will be here at that URL. So with that being said, here we go. So we're all here to discuss .NET on a Mac, which, given a couple years ago, that would have been preposterous to even talk about. But now, here in the year 2017 now, you can develop a fully fledged, officially Microsoft-built .NET app on any platform now with something called .NET Core. That brings us to the first point, is introducing what .NET Core is. So .NET Core is a complete rewrite of all of the .NET libraries. So they're extremely portable, and what that means is that the .NET framework that we all know and love is pretty much wrappers around a lot of Windows native APIs. So that's what tied itself to the Windows platform. So what that means is that this rewrite abstracted that away and made that cross-platform, so it's not as dependent on Windows anymore. What that means is that it's open source, cross-platform, and much lighter as well. And it's really built around a lot of the modern development ideas that have sprung up over the past couple years. So how did we get here? Why did Microsoft go, hey, I need to make an open source cross-platform language? Well, as we all know, Microsoft loves its developers. From BizSpark to Azure to Visual Studio to everything about it, they really care about the developer experience. And they noticed that a lot of developers were drifting away from PCs. They had, in 2016, 40% of developers were not on Windows, and hold on, 60% were on Windows, sorry. So that's over half. That's the majority of developers were using a Windows machine. But by the year 2016, less than 40% were actually on Windows. There's been a big movement in Linux and also Mac-based development. So they said, wait a minute, we need to get caught up with the times. And they also saw a lot of open source successes. The open source community is a strong, vibrant community. Projects have seen a lot of success, especially in the language department. You have your Node.js, you have your Ruby, you have your Python, your PHP. All those were open source technologies, and they've all been very successful. So before you guys go, well, wait a minute. Let's talk about Mono. Mono has been a third-party, use the term third-party loosely, cross-platform framework for .NET. So the difference between Mono and .NET Core is that Mono is a complete rewrite and complete implementation of the .NET framework. So it's pretty much a one-to-one copy. .NET Core is a complete rewrite and complete update. So it's not taking the old ideas and rewriting it. It's taking the old ideas, reworking them, reformatting them for a modern era of development. So there's no antiquated technologies like web forms. There's nothing like that. It's all MVC based, and it's all built to scale with the web. Another side note about Mono is now that Mono and .NET Core do pretty much the same thing. And since Microsoft also owns Mono, the future is kind of unknown. It's kind of uncertain. They might keep it around, they might not. They don't know where they're going to go with it. So what exactly is new in .NET Core? So a few of these concepts. It's lighter. It is much smaller than the traditional .NET framework. And that's because it goes with this concept of it only gives you what you need. So .NET Framework, the classic .NET Framework, gives you everything in the kitchen sink right out of the box. And you have a new .NET project, you get all the DLLs, and you have to manually go in and clear them out. .NET Core is completely the opposite. It says you have to install everything you need. So if you need strings, you have to install those. If you need dependency injection, you install that. If you need link, you install that. It's not built in right to you, so it's much lighter to use. You as the developer have a lot more power and flexibility to what your program uses. They've really embraced this concept of middleware. And we'll get more into this later. That means I can now structure my requests around an HTTP pipeline to really streamline and reuse my app. It made configuration extremely easy by embracing a concept called dependency injection and using a project.json, which mimics what's going on in the node world. They've really reworked Razor. How many people here have worked with Razor before? You know, a little @ sign, and then you do something. They've really simplified that down to something more elegant and easy to use. There's actually no @ signs in the new Razor. And they've also dealt with the static files. Because nowadays, a lot of servers aren't really doing a lot of dynamic rendering. They're more just, here's some JSON and here's some JavaScript files. They've really optimized how their web server handles static files. And actually, an interesting benchmark just came out a couple months ago. For plain text files, .NET Core is exponentially beating out Node.js. I mean like 10,000 more requests a second. I mean, like, really crushing it. So its speed is definitely there. So before we go further, kind of backpedal. Even though we hit 1.1 in September, it doesn't include all the old .NET libraries. There's still a lot of old libraries. Binary serialization still has a way to go. Signal R isn't converted over yet. And a whole bunch of third-party tools are not over yet. Also, the tooling is much different. We all know Visual Studio, right? We all love it. It's big. It's awesome. It does everything for us. But it does debatably too much. So with the .NET Core, they've introduced a newer, a lighter, more a new text editor called Visual Studio Code that is pluggable and follows the exact same paradigm where you only you only install what you want. So you want a profiler, you install it. You want a debugger, you install it. You want F#, you install it. It doesn't give it to you right out of the box. So the tooling is still kind of new. Not unstable, just new. It hasn't seen much production use yet because it's still, this 1.0 just hit 1.0 in June, 1.1 in September, so it's still new. But companies are slowly starting to migrate over to it because of its benefits. And also it comes with what's called a go live agreement. What that means that if you use it in a production environment and you hit a production bug, Microsoft will help you through it. They guarantee you that they will fix it and get that released out to you as soon as possible, which is amazing. That's them standing behind their new framework, encouraging people to take a calculated risk on using a new and shiny, sexy framework. The complete disclaimer is that I actually haven't used this in a production environment because it hit 1.0, because I just started teaching here in the Iron Yard back in August. I've kind of been engrossed in developing content for that, so I haven't had a chance to actually develop something. That being said, the next app that I plan on building will be in .NET Core, hands down. There's no reason not to use it now. It has the power of .NET, it has the speed of Node.js, it has the community that else has. It's there. It really is. If I was starting a new project today, this is what I would use to build the app. So before we dive into some code examples, let's kind of walk over some concepts so we're all on the same page. MVC is pretty much how to build modern web apps. And that's really embraced in .NET, as we all know. I won't spend too much time on this. But we know that the model is working with the data, the view is what the user sees, and the controller is what dictates what goes on. So the next thing that .NET Core really embraces is something called dependency injection. Who's heard of this before? Okay. That's a question that I usually don't get a lot of hands raised. So props. I like it. So what it is that it's based around composition and it's something called inversion of control. So what that means is that if I have a class that talks to a database, I now have to pass it a database helper, and pass it how to talk to that database and what your data source is. So you can pass it a Mongo database, you can pass it a SQL database, you can pass it whatever you want, and it'll still act the same. The next big concept is middleware. So middleware is it's possible in .NET, but it's really embraced in .NET Core. And what it does is it allows you to place your logic in these modular components. And as your request comes in from the web server, it's going to hit each one of these middlewares, one at a time, and then bubble back up. This allows you to really abstract away concepts such as authentication, logging, web requests. It really allows you to abstract and compartmentalize that. Nice, simple, and easy to understand, and reusable components. So those are kind of the brand new concepts, quote unquote, that they've really embraced. So let's talk about the tooling here. Well, .NET Core is command line based. So you can actually use it in any editor that you want. You can use it in Notepad++, Sublime, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, Eclipse, PyCharm if you're so frisky for it. But it's command line based. So all the commands are now command line. It really centers around, surprisingly, NPM and Yeoman to have your templates generated for you. It also uses Visual Studio Code, which we will explore here soon. There are a few extensions that I recommend, such as the C# extension, so you can actually make C# code. When I say Visual Studio Code comes with nothing, I mean it comes with nothing. Also, I would recommend installing a NuGet and also a beautifier as well, because we all like our code to look beautiful. So that being said, let's make something. So we will be creating an app. That's really small, isn't it? Can you guys see that like at all? No, you cannot. So this is where audience participation happens. I am really bad with Macs, to be quite honest. So, it was there?
You just command plus.
Can I? Ta-da!
And then to go back to default command 0.
Cool. So just like a web page. Awesome. So here we are in our terminal. Like I said, if you have everything installed correctly, you should be able to type .NET, and it'll give you a lot of different options. That's after you get the installer downloaded, which is a simple one-click installer, or you can use Homebrew to install it as well if you're on a Mac. But also to make sure that you have Yo installed. Type in Yo, make sure it's recognized. So we first want to create a new project. And inside of that, we actually want to type. Actually, want to use our generator. There's a template called ASP.NET. And that is the template for a Windows library. That is a template for web application, web API, a Nancy application, and also a class library. So what that boils down to is that it allows, these templates are starting points for you to kickstart your project. So the kind of the differences that we have going on here. Web application is everything you need to start a new site. It is Bootstrap. It is your favorite JavaScript front end. It is C#. It is in-memory database. And it also gives you authentication built in right out of the box, which is pretty cool. Web application without authorization is what it says on the box. Everything I just said minus users. Nancy ASP.NET. So Nancy is the super lightweight engine in .NET, and I haven't used it, but I've heard great things about it. But we, for tonight, want to keep things simple. Let's create ourselves a web application without authentication. We want to use Bootstrap, and we'll name it. We'll keep it the default name. So after you do it, it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff. And what that stuff is doing is that it's installing, it's building a project for you, it's getting everything together. And then it says, hey, it's created. We can do .NET Restore. Can someone hit the lights so you guys can see that? I just noticed this is hard to see. Thank you. So now it's saying, hey, run these commands and your website will run for you. And stop me if you have any questions or can't see. So I move into that folder. I type the first command, which is .NET Restore. And what that's doing is that that's looking at my project and saying, hey, you have dependencies that are not installed yet. So I'm going to go out and install them for you. That's all it's doing. And then I'm going to use .NET Run, and that's going to build my C#. That's going to start my web server. It's going to minify my CSS and HTML, and then it will also start my web server. So now I can go to localhost 5000, and there's my website right out of the box. It looks decent. It looks nice. It is good enough for most sites out there. I mean, as I'm sure you can tell, it's basic. It's using Bootstrap, everyone's favorite CSS framework. So yeah, it generates that. So let's look at what it actually generated. So I open up Visual Studio Code. I see here's everything that the generator gave me. So let's kind of walk through this a little bit. We have our controllers here. Who all has done MVC work in .NET before? Who hasn't? So we are familiar with controllers and views and models and what they do.
It looks very similar.
It looks very similar. We have our controllers, which control the routing and the logic. We have our views, which has our razor files. But the first new thing we encounter is this www root folder. So before in .NET Framework, you would have your CSS and your JavaScript kind of scattered about in their own folders. But now any static assets that you have now go in the www root folder, and they'll automatically, and the web server knows that those are static assets. So it's no longer intermingled. So it's a lot cleaner. So now you can just give your front-end developers, say, here, play in this folder, and that's it. Don't touch my views. It's laughing because you know it's true. So, where's my cup holder? So a few other things of interesting that it's given us. It's given us a Docker file right out of the box. Who has not heard of Docker? Don't be shy. All right. So Docker is a deployment platform that allows you to easily deploy and manage your code instances of your server. So I can just give a Docker instance this file, and it'll set up for me a .NET server that has the latest version, and I know it will be the exact same as my dev machine, hands down. So it's not an ISO, it's not an image, it's just a configuration format. And it's used to manage deployments. And all that is already built in. So I can use that and go to any Docker compatible site like Amazon, EC2, Azure, Docker Cloud, and say, here's my project, host it for me. Simple as that. Next up on our tour of this is our program.cs, which this is the entry point to the application. So whenever I run .NET Run, this is what's actually running. So as you can see, we are configuring a few things, and we are building up our server. So let's check it out. We have the two lines that are of interest to me, at least, are the use Kestrel and the use startup. So Kestrel is the new version of IIS. Can you guys see that in the back? Vaguely? You cool there? Thank you. So Kestrel is very interesting. That is the new version of IIS. I say that big asterisk. So IIS has a lot of tools built into it. It has authentication, it has caching, it has the whole kit thing. Kestrel is just a web server, and that's it. There's nothing else. It's just serving up your files. The other line of interest to me is this use startup. So we're all familiar with the generic syntax. You know that use startup is looking for a class. So this is where dependency injection first appears. It's pretty heavy. We're saying, hey, use startup. So use my startup class. Now my startup class is where the actual configurations happen. This is telling me the details about my web server and what's going on. It's telling me, hey, I'm using MVC. I have my app settings over here in my file. It's saying, what environment I'm in. It's saying, hey, use my static files, my www root. This is where most of the magic is happening. So you could, in theory, have a different startup file for every environment that you're in. And it would be used to configure your app slightly differently. So now your application is the same, but it's acting differently depending on what startup class that you pass in. And the last new file is its project.json file. Traditionally, websites in .NET, we all know what a web config is, right? It's that big, gloriously huge XML file that's in the root of every .NET web project. And it's specifying, what versions of code we're running, what our connection strings are, all that. One of the goals of .NET Core is actually simplify configuration. I'm sure, I don't know if you noticed, but we have our app settings.json. Now our app settings are no longer buried inside of our web config. They're over here in this JSON file. We have, and the project JSON file that we're in right now, that's what all dependencies we have. So I need these libraries to run my web app, and that's it. And that's all that I'm going to get. So this app's footprint is a lot smaller than a normal, traditional .NET Framework web app. So any questions to where we are so far? Thoughts, comments?
You said that the project.json kind of takes over what web.config. We still have
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. It's a lot smaller though.
So it's 14 lines.
Which is unheard of in the web config world.
And
all it's doing is that it's doing a little bit of naming for your Kestrel server, and that's it.
So
it's not really doing much. It's not storing any settings, not storing any dependencies or connection strings or anything like that. It's all just, hey, I'm a .NET Core app. That's it. Host me as such. Good question.
That couldn't have been done in the project.json.
Great question. It could have been. But then you'd be muddling up concerns. The project JSON is just for what libraries you need.
Wouldn't web config still be
Yeah, that's why it's an XML file, not a JSON file. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes to both. Well, good. So let's start our first concept. Let's explore this concept of middleware a little bit. Let's do this by adding a bit better logging to our application here. So you see, we have a little bit of default log here. Well, I'm not happy with that. I want to extend it a little bit. So I want to add a console going on here. I want to make sure that I'm logging everything. So all I'm doing here is just creating a new logger that I'm calling development. And now I actually want to use that. So I want to add my middleware. Now, this is where I'm going to add a lot of middleware for my application. This is where I'm setting up a lot of the HTTP pipeline. And I do that by the first thing, because order matters when I'm applying middleware. I want to type app.use, and that takes a method that's an async method that has two parameters. I'm not going to type that out. So hold on just 30 seconds here. So let's look at what we added here. Looking at our application, and we're using a keyword called use. Not saying, hey, I want to use this. And that use takes a function that is asynchronous, that has two things. It has a context and a net. So the context is what's going on in that application in that middleware. And that next is what the next step is. So if you recall the fancy diagram I had going on, you could set up a module, set up a piece of middleware, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. So what this is doing, whatever request comes into our server, we're hitting this first. We're gonna print out to our logger, handling request for our path, so whatever resource we're getting. Then we're gonna call the next step, which will be, in our case, it'll be the controllers. It's gonna do its thing. After we get our response, it's gonna pass it up, bubble it back up through the middleware. And last thing it'll do, it'll hit this log information, and it'll say finish request for that path. So let's see this in action. If I save it, go back to my console, and call .NET Run. If I go back to my local host, we have our banners. It's handling it for every request. So saying, hey, we got a request for this. We're doing stuff. Hey, finishing it up. And it has that for each and every request that's happening. So what also I can do with this is, if I wanted to, just to kind of drive the point home, I can create another one, an app.use, and use that to check the authentication token to make sure that every request has the proper authorization. I can also attach this to specific controllers and specific routes. So say, hey, whenever I run this controller, I run this middleware with it. Any thoughts on that? Now this kind of thinking is entirely possible in .NET Framework, but it's not this easy. So that's interesting, I guess.
What would that look like? What would that look like being attached to a controller?
Attach your controller. You would create your middleware in its own class. Who asked that question? Okay. So you can create your own controller in a class. Your own middleware in a class. Then use a attribute on the controller to call that middleware. I don't have an example of that. But that's the methodology. So as you can imagine, this kind of thinking is putting it right here on your configuration. It could get very crowded very fast, especially if you're doing complex stuff inside of your middlewares. So what people tend to do is create their own class that actually extends the built-in middleware, and then just reference that wherever it needs to happen. So cool. So let's do the next fun thing, and let's actually talk to a database. So along with the .NET Core and along in the .NET, we've all heard of something called Entity Framework. An Entity Framework is a common ORM in the .NET world that's made by Microsoft. It has also gotten a complete rewrite into something called Entity Framework Core. Optimized, it's all the same buzzwords around .NET Core. It's faster, it's sexier, it's whatever. But it's still there. It still does most of the things that we know and love. It has the same limitations. It's still new. It has 80% of your use cases covered. So it's ready for us to use. So let's go ahead and use it. So in order for us to use it, we have to go to our project JSON and add in the dependencies that we need to use it. So let's go in to our project JSON. And inside of this dependencies field, this dependency object that we have going on right here, let's add in 2 references. We have our NET Framework Core SQLite. That's going to be our light database that we're going to keep on file. And let's also add in NET Framework.design with the version and the type.
Now with this, are you able to install whatever dependency package is going to establish our dependencies? .NET Core have something.
Yes, that's called NuGet.
Oh, okay, so you just run Dewey to install it.
Yeah. So pretty much very similar to how Node.js works. You can add dependencies manually to your package JSON and then run npm install. Conversely, use npm install package. So yes, that is correct. And then we also want to add something to our tools section. This is like the dev dependencies in Node.js, if anyone's done that. This is something to make our lives as a developer easier. And then once I save my project JSON, I can go back to my command line and run .NET restore. And it'll go through and it'll check my project JSON and install everything that's not already installed. So now it's going to go through and install NET Framework, NET Framework tools, so now it's available for me to use. So now I want to rebuild it because I like knowing I didn't mess anything up. And now that that's done, I can go back to my folder and I can add, go back to my site, add a new folder called models. And inside of that, we're going to be adding something called just generic models CS. So for a real site, a real .NET project, we know that classes get their own files, but for demos, that's usually not the case. So inside of our models, we are going to create our DB context as well as all of our tokos for our database. So just kind of walk them through what we added here. We have our good friend DB context. We have our music context because we're making an album store for the web. So anywhere I can go in and check out my CD collection, see kind of what CDs I have. CDs with the little plastic things that go in CD players. For all you youngins out there.
Oh yeah, those things.
Yeah, those things, you know. So a few things have changed here from basic entity framework. You have your on configuration, and that's where you're setting some of your values. It's very similar, but a little bit of differences going on. You also have your dependency injection built into your constructor. So that's being used by .NET Core to kind of control what's going on. And then you have, of course, your DB sets, which are your database tables. And then down here you have your we have our one lonely class album that has an album ID and a name. It's something very basic for me to manage my CDs. So now that we've created our models, we've created our context, we now have to go and register them in our startup CS. So our app actually knows what the hell's going on. So if we go down into our startup CS, we want to add a using to our models. And inside of our configuration services here, we're already telling it that we are an MVC app. We also now want to add a DB context. And that's going to be our music context. There's another point of reference where we have a dependency injection. now we're injecting our startup configuration into our application. And we're also injecting what our database context looks like into our configuration space. So now that means I can go ahead and change out my database super easy by just changing this right here. Extremely flexible and extremely portable. Now we get down into our entity framework funness, where we have to create our migrations, we get to update our database. So because we install the entity framework tools in our package JSON, we now have the entity framework command line tools available to us. And you use them by typing .NET EF, and then what you want to do. So I want to call .NET EF migrations. I want to add a new one, and I want to call it firsty. So I add it. It'll run it. It'll build it, and it'll create an update script for me to run. So what that did, looking back at our code, they created us a model builder and a snapshot in our migration scripts of what we need to know. So who here is using ORM before in their work, like Hibernate, Entity Framework, Mongoose for Node, stuff like that? What? Active record for your Ruby people. It's the same kind of concept. We have our migration scripts, we have our configurations. So now I can pass this to another developer, and I can build the exact same database with the exact same schema as me. Lickety split.
Django for Python, just add another reference in there.
Django for Python? Django for Python? Yeah. Every language has their favorite ORM. For us, it's Entity Framework or Hibernate, if you subscribe to that kind of thing. So now let's run it. Very similar to how we run our update database before. We would run the command .NET EF database update. And now it's actually created for us our database. It's created our database inside of the bin folder because we told it to use a file. But that would be pointing to a real database in a production app. So now that's there, let's now run our application. And after we run it, we really shouldn't see a difference here. It should still work, it should still load, it should still be pretty. But now, inside of our bin folder, we have our database file. So that's now our database. So now that we've hooked up the model part, let's check out the controller part and the view part of the MVC world. So let's say that I want to display all the records I have in my database. So I'm going to go to my home controller. Going to reference my database context. And inside of my index, inside of my home controller, there is currently a whole bunch of routes because each method is a route. But there's no controller yet. There's no constructor yet. There's no constructor for our home controller. So we need to add one. Because what this allows us to do this allows the framework that, hey, whenever I new up a new instance of this home controller, I need a music context. So I need a database. I need a database to work with. I need a database to work on. And that is supplied through the startup CS file. Right here. Right here. So it's saying, hey, every time you see a controller that needs a context, pass it a music context. And then if we look at our controller method, we have our index, we have our view, but our view is not being passed anywhere. I want to return a list of all my albums. So what I do is, in order to pass something down to a view, we would do context dot albums to list. And now whenever this runs, we're doing a select star on our database and returning all the albums. So now we hooked up our controller to use our database. So how about the views? Down in the views folder, very similar setup to how .NET Framework. We have our folders that correspond to our controllers. We have our CS/HTML files. But inside of the index, we want to take what's there, gut it, and we want to add some HTML, which is some Razor. So, like traditional Razor, we have a little bit. We have our model defined. Have a little bit of at signedness, which isn't that bad. It's just for logic. And this looks very similar. So Razor or .NET Core is completely backwards compatible. So all the paradigms that you already know, you already can deal with, your display score, your text box scores, all of those already work. Can you guys see that in the back? Yeah? So this is all I'm doing is saying, hey, give me a list of albums. If there's any, loop for them and display it. If there's not, give me a nice friendly message that says you don't have it. So let's save that. And build it. And run it. Now I come back to my home page. I shouldn't see this anymore. I should see no albums found. That makes sense because we don't have any albums in our database. We haven't added any yet. So let's work on that next. So we want to go over to our controllers. Want to make a new route called create. Now we have our page there. And now let's actually create that view. Now, in order to do that, we come over here. Same as before. In normal.net, our view name corresponds to the route method. So that create route is looking inside of our views folder for something called create.cshtml. And then inside of that, this is where the new Razor comes into play. So before, this would be super ugly. We'd have all these @ signs, validator for, text box for, but now you see it's all been simplified down into these HTML attributes that are going on here. So it has a whole new category, and you see if the attribute starts with ASP dash, that's Razor telling the web server that, hey, this is Razor, but it needs to be interpreted as such. So you see we have our form, looking for our controller, our action, we have our validation. So every component that we're used to seeing is there, except now it's in a much easier to comprehend format, and you don't have to know C#. I would feel comfortable passing this off to a front-end developer and saying, hey, use these tags, and that's it. odds are they could understand it. So specifically, here's an input tag. Before we'd have to do our add HTML.textbox for, then pass the model, properties, but now it's just, hey, human input, ASP4, name. Simple as that. Simple as that. Really streamline the development process that way. So now that we have our page, let's go to our layout. Change up our menu a little bit. So now that we have our page, we have our create page, we have our create route, we need something to handle that form post. So let's create another route inside of our controller. And let's see what we have going on here. We have our attributes, which are pretty comfortable to .NET developers. We're saying, hey, it's a post. Hey, we're looking for our forgery validation. And then we have our create. Inside of our create, we're checking to see if the model state is valid. Thanks to NET framework, we have built-in validation. We are adding it to our database and saving it. And then we are redirecting them back to the index page because we want to see it actually added to our collection. So if we come over here and build it and run it, and reload it, we have still no albums found, but we also have now our create album link. I create my album. And now it's added to our list. That's in our database, that's persisting, that's doing all the magic that a website can do right there. Thoughts into how we got this far. Questions comparing it to what apps you guys are building. Not yet. So you remember how I said that the tooling is kind of limited right now? You have to type most of it as of right now. If you're using Visual Studio Code. If you're still on a Windows machine and using Visual Studio Community, like the full-blown edition, then yeah, it does do scaffolding for you. Not to worry a little bit. Because to be honest, that's my first impression. Is like, this is a lot of work. I come from a .NET world where I have Visual Studio, where I can go, hey, right-click, create controller, give me all my CRUD actions for this model, be done. Yeah, that's not there yet. It's very minimalistic, very DIY. That's if you're not using Visual Studio. Does that answer your question? Yes.
But if you are using Visual Studio.
Yes, if you are using Visual Studio, it's really as simple as right-click an add new controller and pick the template. I'm on a Mac right now. Visual Studio is not officially 2.1.0 on a Mac. It is coming at some point in the near future. Some point. I have not tried the preview yet. I do have a student who has tried it. John, Wade. What are your thoughts on it so far?
I mean, it's not direct. It doesn't have direct parity with the Windows version, but it's close. But yeah, it's a little rough.
So maybe sometime in the near future we can say Visual Studio is officially awesome on Mac. But
So what do you think the roadmap is? Do you think they're going to keep them both? Or do you think
I'm pretty sure they're going to keep them both, because Visual Studio Code is really built around this paradigm where you as the developer only install the tools. So it's really appealing to that Atom crowd, that Sublime crowd. pardon the phrase, or hipster developer. Really appealing to that. And conversely, Visual Studio is built for the developer that wants the power. And wants to just give me all my tool set and just let me be done. So I think they'll keep them around. But that's my best guess. I really like what they're doing with Visual Studio Code because they're getting a whole bunch of direct developer feedback and saying, hey, what do you actually need to develop? Because if you look at what the UI is like, we have just to walk through this a little bit. We have our file explorer. We have a fancy find feature where we can search around. We have our GitHub, we have integrated Git, so you can do all your Git commands right there. We have our debugging console, and we also have our package manager for Visual Studio Code, and that's it. This is what 90% of developers use their IDE for. That's pretty much it. And so they're tailoring it really down to what developers use. I can say personally, I've used maybe 20% of Visual Studio features. Like the full-blown features, there's just so many and so powerful. But I don't need it most of the time. So this is really what they're focusing on. Yes. Does that answer your question? You could do database first. I am not aware if you can do it with .NET Core Entity Framework or not.
Yes, you can.
The audience is saying yes, you can.
It's a pain.
What?
Yes, you
What?
can.
That's a pain, but yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of database first. I like just handling all my stuff on the C# level. But that's just a personal preference. I've worked with database first on a really gnarly database that left a really bad impression on me. Not gonna lie. So good question. Anyone else?
Have you worked with the built-in Git on the
Yeah. It's super nice. It's super nice. I'm not gonna lie. It's very nice. I highly recommend Git. I think it's a very powerful tool for developers. I think it's pretty much needed nowadays in the year 2017. Visual Studio community, like the full-blown Visual Studio, I don't like their Git integration. I haven't really grown fond of it. I still use the terminal for my Git. But that's the first real source control extension that I've used and liked. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments so far? All right. So next, let's update our model. So I want to update my model in my database to store a URL for an image. So if I go to my model, I can add it right there. And now I have to update my database. So I go back to my command line. And I want to, hey, using .NET, using MVC framework, and I want to go to my migrations, and I want to add a new one, and I want to call it add image URL. Now this will look at my POCOs in C# and go, hey, what's different? And it'll create for me a new migration. Then after that, I want to run it. And now I've added a new field to my database. As simple as that. As simple as that. And now whenever I display this, I want to use my bootstrap that's already built in, and I want to display my images in a somewhat pretty manner. So in order to do that, I have to add a little bit of CSS. So I go to where my assets are stored. My assets are stored, if we recall, over in our www root folder. You have a CSS folder, and inside of that, you see we have two files. We have site.css, we have site.min.css. So we can make any changes we want in site.css, and whenever we build it, it'll automatically minify it down to min.css, which is pretty cool. And it's less work for me to manage, and I like less work. So I want to add a quick class called album art. I do. How about that? You know, I would have been frustrated in 10 minutes going, why isn't this working? So I added my new CSS class for my images. And then I want to update my index page to have the following HTML. And all I'm doing here that I'm adding and using a little bit of the Bootstrap built-in classes to give me a nice grid and to give me a thumbnail image for each album. So if I save it and run it, it'll build, it'll do its thing. I should have a somewhat prettier app show for me. So there we go. We have our one album, max width of 100%. With a nice little default image going on there. If I zoom it back out to normal people size, as you can see where I have a nice grid kind of forming here. You know, this doesn't look half bad for not a lot of work. But when we go to create an album, we're still creating only an album that has just a name. So now we need to update our form. So if we go to our create, we take this form group, and instead of ASP-name or -4, change that to image URL. So now all I did here was I added a new form group, which is from Bootstrap. That's why it looks somewhat pretty. Say, hey, now create me an input box for the property of image URL. So now that's there. And because we're already using Entity Framework, it's already doing the saving for us. So I need an image now. There we go. Now we can add images. To image, we can add CDs, and that's looking like a site I would see online. It's looking pretty legit. And because we're using .NET 4, it's now scalable. It's now cross-platform. I can host it now on a Linux box for dirt cheap. Although I don't need an entire Windows instance now. So there. Any questions or anything like that?
Actually, just touched on my question was hosting it. You can host it on a Linux server.
Yes, you can host it on a Linux server. There's a few sites out there. Heroku is gaining support for it. I know it's a big hosting site. There's a site called Zeeit, Z-E-I-T. Also hosts .NET sites for really cheap. But it's pretty much anywhere that hosts Docker files, you can host .NET Core. So Amazon EC2, Azure, Docker Cloud supports that. Or a cheap Linux box that you have in the closet. Raspberry Pi, yes. There's actually a build of .NET Core specifically for Raspberry Pi. It's optimized and even lighter. It only includes libraries that are non-visual because there's no built-in UI for a Pi. So can you do like any like system drawing or? But if you're doing like database stuff, yeah. I have a coworker from my last job. He took .NET Core on a Raspberry Pi and was hosting his own site on it, like from his desk. It was crazy cool. And with that, Raspberry Pi, since it's runnable on that, it opens up the whole IoT stuff as well. You can have a Raspberry Pi that detects when someone does pass, it does host your web server, that tracks how many people are in your office. So not only does it allow you to build these websites in a modern fashion, it also allows you to turn into what is arguably the next big thing in technology.
I'm not familiar with that.
That's what Kestrel is. Kestrel is the web server that you would use in place of IIS.
So iOS application start on IIS. How would you
Command line and let it go. If you look at the, I believe it's in there. So here's the Docker file. So this is saying, hey, it's a Microsoft .NET instance. So you get the latest version of .NET Core. And now you specify in your project JSON. And then it just runs these commands whenever it opens up a new Docker image. Then you see this last one. We have our .NET Restore, we have our .NET Build, steps that we're used to. And then saying, hey, expose our port 5000. That's what we run on. And then run .NET Run and use that server URL. So this is what's actually starting your server. So whenever you deploy it, it's going to create a new Docker file, this new Docker image, and then it will automatically start your web server for you. Correct. Yes. Docker handles all of that magic for you. When I say it's like magically solves your hosting problems, it's magically solving hosting problems. You could also set this up in IIS if you so chose to. It's not tied to Docker, but it has that support built in. All right. Well, that's what I have going on for us today. That's kind of the demo and the introduction. So where do I go from here? Well, as Holly said, we have a .NET course here at the Iron Yard now. Next one starts in March. That's what she said. There's also meetup groups, crash courses are put on monthly. I'm putting on a crash course in 2 weeks about functional programming in .NET. Kind of interesting and cool. But there's also online resources that you guys can go to. So, any other questions?
I wanted to practice some of the stuff that you showed us.
If you want to practice it, there are lots of tutorials in the Virtual Academy in Microsoft on MSDN. The official documentations are there, and this is all in the course materials that you guys signed up for. but the docs are here. The Microsoft Virtual Academy is a really solid resource to learn how to develop using Microsoft tools. There's 2 podcasts that I love to plug for that I really like. .NET Rocks and Hansel Minutes. That's Hanselman, and this is 2 gentlemen who love music and .NET. They do a lot of cool topics. And then yeah, I mean. So thank you for coming. My email is somewhere. Let me bring it up real fast. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea to close my presentation halfway through my presentation. So feel free to reach out. Email and my Twitter handle. I sometimes occasionally tweet interesting things from Hacker News and other stuff like that. Very heavily emphasis on occasionally. But feel free to reach out to me. Other than that, thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Mark. Who's the first time out at the St.Pete.net meetup? First time. All right. Appreciate you guys coming out. We do have some raffle items. I hope to see you next month. Where segue nicely from Mark's talk, where Clayton will be talking about Docker with .NET Core for development and production. So those tie in.